Hello, Mark Sabatella here from Outside Shore Music. In this video, I'm going to talk about jazz. This is Jazz Appreciation Month, at least here in the US, and I don't know what other countries might recognize it as such, April. I've been mostly talking about counterpoint lately because we're in the middle of my practical counterpoint course, and in this video, I'm going to talk about jazz, but I'm going to relate it to a couple of the concepts that we talk about in the counterpoint course. And here I'm not going to talk about anything like really complex about counterpoint that would feel like it's a difficult compositional device. I'm going to talk about a real simple aspect of counterpoint that almost all jazz improvisers use almost without thinking. And it's the idea of taking a motif and repeating it, but with some variations. So the idea of repeating a motif, this is central to the counterpoint concept of imitation. We're going to have a motif and we're going to reuse that motif. And sometimes we reuse it literally. Other times, though, we create some variation on it. And there's a couple different types of variation that we learn about in a counterpoint course. There's what we call real and tonal imitation. A real imitation is one where we copy it exactly, perhaps transposing it. A tonal imitation is one where maybe we adjust some pitches along the way to better fit the key or harmony that's going on. And then there's the idea of inversion, where we take a line that's going up and we make it go down, or vice versa. And there's other variations also. And these are the sorts of things that improvisers do kind of without really thinking too hard about it. It's just a natural part of the idea of developing a melodic motif. So I'm going to look at this piece. It's called Sister Cheryl by drummer Tony Williams, who's a great and underrated composer. This piece is really interesting in a lot of ways. I could go much more deep into it at some other point. One of the things that's really interesting about it is that the actual chord progression to the song, the main chord progression, is in the Mixolydian mode, which is pretty rare. I mean, you find a lot of people using the Mixolydian mode, but over a single chord. Here we have an entire chord progression that, if you analyze it, you'll find out is coming from Mixolydian mode. But what I'm going to talk about is the solo played by Branford Marsalis on Wynton Marsalis's debut album. So we're going to take a look at that right now. And I have it queued up to the end of the piano solo. The piano soloist is Herbie Hancock. And at the end of his solo, which is improvised, he plays a little motif that Branford then picks up in his solo. And so we're going to listen to that, and then I'm going to talk through it. So here is, if the copyright gods allow, here is that end of Herbie Hancock's solo going into the beginning of Branford Marsalis's solo. Herbie Hancock on piano, Branford Marsalis on soprano saxophone. And that's it. That's all I want to talk about. So Herbie plays this figure, and let me flip over to the chord progression here. Herbie plays this figure at the end of his solo that's basically something like that, right? It's got that da-da-da-dum. It's just a simple motif. It's a two-note motif with each note repeated. Ba-dum, ba-dum. And then he repeats it literally, and then he plays around with that motif a little bit. And I'm actually not going to talk about what Herbie does with it, which is great, but I want to talk about what Branford does with it. What Branford does with it then, because that original motif is just over a single chord, Branford takes that motif and uses it over this first section of the piece. And he plays, so B, B, A, A, that's the original motif over that B chord. And that B chord is kind of a seventh chord, the way it's being voiced, because it is Mixolydian mode. Then the chord changes to G minor 7. And Branford changes the note so that it's not, he doesn't use an A natural over that G sharp minor 7, he uses an A sharp or B flat if you prefer, because it fits the chord better. It's a whole step above the root of the chord, which is a major ninth as opposed to minor ninth, and it's just a prettier note. So this is what we would call tonal imitation. He's adjusting the pitch. It's the same basic motif, but now it's adjusted to fit the harmony. Then he then plays that same motif inverted. The original motif went down, but now he's adjusted it to go up. Again, he's playing chord tones. That's the D sharp is a chord tone over the G sharp minor 7, and then he plays the E natural over the A major 7. So it's all good chord tones, good solid color tones that he's using. So he's used imitation, direct imitation, just copying Herbie Hancock's line exactly, and then he's made a tonal variation on it, and then he's also inverted the line, sequenced it by taking it up, in this case basically up a fourth, I guess. And so we get to see the idea of Herbie Hancock having sequenced his line, Branford having imitated it, and then used literal, real imitation, and then used tonal imitation where he made that adjustment, and then used inversion. And this is all just like just within that very short segment. And it's all going on spontaneously. This is just a natural part of how jazz musicians communicate, take ideas, pass them around, develop them. And it's all really, when you think about it, time-honored practice that comes from the practice of counterpoint.